Imagine stepping onto the battlefield of World War II, where bullets tear through the air and death lurks behind every shadow. You might think survival was almost impossible, but for the average U.S. soldier, the odds were surprisingly in their favor. Today we uncover why those survival rates tell a shocking story. Before we dive in, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another deep dive into history. If you're fascinated by the untold truths of war, comment "History Matters" below. Now let's explore the real survival odds of U.S. soldiers in World War II. Imagine stepping onto the battlefield of World War II, where bullets tear through the air and death lurks behind every shadow. You might think survival was almost impossible, but for the average U.S. soldier, the odds were surprisingly in their favor. Today we uncover why those survival rates tell a shocking story. Before we dive in, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another deep dive into history. If you're fascinated by the untold truths of war, comment "History Matters" below. Now let's explore the real survival odds of U.S. soldiers in World War II. When we think of World War II, we often picture endless trenches, blood-soaked fields, and soldiers with grim faces, ready to die for their country. Movies like Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers have engraved in our minds the image of war as a death sentence. But here's the twist. Statistically, an American soldier in World War II had a far better chance of surviving than most people believe. Yes, it was terrifying. Yes, people died in horrific ways. But the numbers reveal a very different reality from the Hollywood drama. The United States mobilized over 16 million military personnel during World War II. Out of those, 416,000 were killed in action, and about 683,000 were wounded. This means only around 6% became casualties, a shockingly small percentage compared to what most people imagine. Does this mean the war was safe? Absolutely not. It just means that the majority of soldiers, about 94%, made it home alive. But how is that possible in a global conflict that claimed over 70 million lives worldwide? The answer lies in strategy, technology, and the sheer scale of the war. At first glance, 6% casualties might seem small, but when applied to 16 million soldiers, that's still a staggering figure. Let's put this into perspective. If you were drafted, you had a 94% chance of surviving the war. Compare this to the Soviet Union, where some estimates suggest 1 in 3 soldiers never made it back. German troops, their casualty rate hovered around 30 to 40% in some campaigns. So, for an American soldier, the odds were dramatically better than for most other combatants. Now let's dig deeper. The death rate for U.S. soldiers was 8.6 per 1,000 soldiers in action. Add 3 non-combat deaths per 1,000, things like accidents, disease, or friendly fire, then there were 17.7 non-fatal wounds per 1,000 soldiers. In simpler terms, for every 1,000 soldiers who went into action, about 9 died in combat, 3 died from other causes, and 18 came home wounded but alive. What does this tell us? It tells us that while danger was real, the overwhelming majority of soldiers made it through the war without being killed or even severely wounded. Now, why did American soldiers have such favorable odds compared to their allies or their enemies? There are several reasons. First, industrial power and logistics. The United States had an unmatched industrial capacity. While Germany and Japan were rationing supplies, America was producing 297,000 aircraft, 88,000 tanks, and over 12 million rifles. This massive production meant U.S. troops were better armed, better supplied, and better fed than almost any soldier on the planet. In fact, many German soldiers joked that Americans were fighting a rich man's war because they had plenty of everything, from ammunition to chocolate bars. Second, medical advancements. World War II saw huge improvements in battlefield medicine. The widespread use of sulfa drugs, penicillin, and blood plasma saved countless lives. Unlike in World War I, where a gunshot often meant certain death from infection, U.S. medics could treat wounds quickly and effectively. Third, superior air and naval power. By 1944, the Allies dominated the skies and seas. Air superiority drastically reduced the chances of soldiers being slaughtered in large-scale offensives. Bombers and fighters weakened enemy positions before ground troops even arrived. Fourth, rotation and rest systems. Unlike the Germans or Soviets, who often kept soldiers at the front until they died or were incapacitated, the U.S. implemented rotation systems. Soldiers got rest periods, reducing fatigue and improving their odds of survival. And finally, timing. The U.S. entered the war in 1941, 2 years after the conflict started. By then, the British had weathered the worst of the Battle of Britain, and the Soviets had absorbed massive German offensives. America fought hard battles, but not at the catastrophic level seen on the Eastern Front in 1941 and 1942. Even with better survival rates, life for a soldier was no walk in the park. Imagine being a 19-year-old farm boy from Kansas, landing on the beaches of Normandy. The first wave of D-Day troops faced a 50% casualty rate, a terrifying statistic. However, these extreme cases were rare. Most soldiers spent more time behind the front lines than in actual firefights. The average U.S. soldier's combat experience looked like this: long periods of boredom, punctuated by short bursts of terror, weeks in relatively safe zones, followed by days or hours of intense fighting. Duties like patrolling, setting up camps, and moving supplies often outweighed actual firefights. The psychological toll, however, was massive. Even if you weren't physically wounded, the mental scars lasted a lifetime. Many veterans struggled with what we now call PTSD, though it went largely unrecognized at the time. Did soldiers know their odds? Not exactly. Most felt that death could come at any moment. In fact, soldiers in the thick of battle rarely thought about statistics. They thought about survival. Day by day, letters from the front reveal a common theme: fear of dying far from home, hope of returning to loved ones, and resignation to fate. One soldier wrote, "They say only 1 in 10 of us will die. I keep wondering if I'll be that one." This constant uncertainty made every day feel like a borrowed gift. To fully appreciate the survival odds of U.S. soldiers, compare them to other major powers. The Soviet Union suffered around 8.7 million military deaths, with casualty rates up to 30 or 40% in some units. Germany lost over 5 million troops, with entire divisions wiped out on the Eastern Front. Japan lost about 2.1 million soldiers, with many fighting to the last man. By contrast, the U.S. lost 416,000 troops. Tragic, but a fraction compared to others. Not all deaths happened in battle. Around 3 deaths per 1,000 soldiers were from non-combat. Causes like disease, accidents, training mishaps, and friendly fire. For example, malaria killed thousands of soldiers in the Pacific Theater. Airplane crashes during training claimed more lives than some combat zones. Why does this matter today? Because it reshapes our understanding of war. Survival wasn't guaranteed, but it wasn't hopeless either. These numbers show that preparation, logistics, and technology can save lives, even in the most brutal conflicts. It also reminds us that while 94% survived, the emotional scars endured by nearly everyone who served. Survival in war isn't just about living, it's about carrying the weight of what you've seen and done. The story of the average U.S. soldier in World War II isn't just about numbers. It's about resilience, courage, and the silent relief of coming home alive when so many others didn't. So the next time someone says, "War is just death," remember, sometimes survival is the untold victory.